Hey guys, welcome back. It is time to do another reaction video today. Before we get into that, I just want to talk a little bit about the weather. As you guys have noticed, I am actually wearing my hoodie. Chicago, awesome place. You guys should go visit if you get the chance. Anyway, I'm wearing it just because it's so cold. I think everywhere is kind of cold for the most part. So if you guys could let me know what your weather's been like these past few days, just comment below. Let me know. Let me know if it's affected you guys negatively or positively. Anyway, I just wanted to bring up the fact that all this crazy weather has been doing a lot of really detrimental things here in the U.S., mainly with the southern states that aren't really used to having snow in these record-breaking cold temperatures. So like Texas is the best example. Like a week ago, they had this huge 103 car pileup. It was really sad to see. But they had snow and ice, and they probably, I don't know if they didn't treat the roads properly or if people weren't used to driving in it, but there was a 103 car pileup. 6 people died. I think 35 were critically injured, and like 65 went to the hospital or something. So you guys could check it out. It's really sad to watch because you just watch a semi after a semi just plowing into these cars. So it's really hard to watch. But yeah, they just had that happen, and then with all these record low temperatures, and they're just not used to it. Right now, I think, there's millions of people without electricity in like 15 states. I'll just take Texas as the example for right now. They've been without power for like 4 days now. They've also, I think they're running low on water. I don't know if the water is freezing or not. And then also their gas to heat their homes is running low or something. I'm not for sure. But it's really weird. Something I didn't actually know about Texas is they have like 20% of their electricity generated from wind turbines. So anyway, because they didn't buy this anti-freeze thing, all the wind turbines are literally freezing up and not turning, so they're not generating electricity. So they're literally they're down 20% of their power, which obviously is affecting all these millions of people. So anyway, I just wanted to ask you guys to keep us in your thoughts and prayers. And again, if you guys could just let me know. Hopefully the weather hasn't affected you guys as negatively. Obviously, I think you guys have pretty harsh winters, so you guys are probably used to it. Yeah, just let me know what this past week's been like for you, because for over here it's been pretty hellish. I'm not gonna lie. Anyway, the video we're going to do today, someone actually messaged me to react to it on Instagram, and if you guys want to go check me out on Instagram, I'll put the link down below. But it's Innocent American 25. You feel free to message me. I've been able to get back with most people. They've been giving me a ton of recommendations and stuff, so I really appreciate all the support you guys have been continuing to give. But yeah, the video we're going to do today is called Plan Red. The title is Britain and America's Playing Wars on Each Other. I did look this up just a little bit because I didn't want to ruin it, but there is this was a hypothetical plan that the U.S. laid out. Obviously, it was never carried in action, and I'm not for sure even how much they were planning on it ever going into play. It was just something that they were from what I understand, and I'm sure the video will explain, between World War I and World War II, they were drawing out scenarios. If we went to war with the UK, what we would do, and that is what this video is going to touch on. And I'm going to learn and see what the U.S. was planning to do. So let's get into it.
The United States and Great Britain were the closest of allies during most of the 20th century. They fought together in 2 world wars and acted as the cornerstones of the post-war NATO alliance. However, for a time in the 1920s and 30s, things were not so rosy. For a time, the militaries of both nations even prepared for open conflict between them. The impact of the First World War had changed relations between Britain and America in some ways that were likely to increase tension between them. First, it left the UK owing a huge war debt to the United States, $22 billion, at a time when...
Okay, so I'm gonna just come clean right now. I don't know a ton about World War I. The focus usually is on World War II, so I do know a little bit about that. Was the UK in debt to the US because we helped them out with supplies and troops and stuff? I'm assuming that's what that is. But yeah, $22 billion. I mean, honestly, nowadays that's actually probably not that much. I mean, yeah, that's crazy.
When their entire GDP was just $26 billion.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Secondly, it removed Germany as a global naval power, when its mighty battle fleet was interned at Scapa Flow and then broken up. With the Germans out of the picture, the United States became the world's second naval power behind Britain, which potentially made her Britain's primary rival for control of the sea.
Yeah, I know this is important because Britain had also, like, that is what made them so powerful hundreds of years. And I don't know if they got touched on it, but I actually don't know when that flipped. Because I think, I mean, at least they say nowadays that the U.S. has the largest navy. So I would be interested in doing a video if someone could recommend like that time frame of when the U.S. took control and started building a bigger fleet than the U.K.
Newfound naval strength was recognised in 1921 when the British agreed to parity with the Americans in capital ships at the Washington Naval Conference. Unlike with Germany's naval challenge earlier in the century, the British government had little desire for another costly naval arms race and was determined to see the United States as a partner, not an enemy. When the Admiralty recommended in June 1919 that an officer be tasked with drawing up contingency plans for war with the US, the British cabinet refused. Prime Minister David Lloyd George was keen not to allow the Navy to use the newly powerful American fleet as justification to increase the size of its own.
I mean, yeah, that's a good thing. I mean, I feel like, I mean, just because it's hit and miss, like one nation is building up bigger than you are, so you would, theoretically, I would think if you could have the means to do it, you would want to combat that. But at the same time, if you really are genuinely allies with one another, you shouldn't have to worry about that. So it's good that, you know, they were able to focus their finances on something else other than military. Is kind of why I was saying that could be a good thing.
This decision irritated some within the Navy who thought that war was possible so long as America's commercial influence across the world continued to grow. Deputy Chief of the Naval Staff, Vice Admiral Sir Osmond Brock, argued that because of Britain's track record of fighting those who threatened its commercial dominance, I am quite ready to allow that a war with the United States is very improbable, but that it is impossible I cannot allow. As for how such a war would happen, the concern for me...
I mean, yeah, I really hope we don't ever go into really another war again. Again, I know the U.S. has tons of little conflicts that we're involved in right now, and my personal belief is I wish we weren't. The fact that war can never happen between a country, even allies, is definitely something you can't just throw off the table, because even the strongest allies, depending on who's in power, when it switches or something like this, you know, people change, countries change, something could happen. Potentially at any time a country go to war with one another. So I guess in some ways it's always good to maybe always have like a plan, I guess, in case that happens.
British perspective was not that the US might simply wake up one day and declare war on Britain,
exactly,
but that the two nations might accidentally stumble into hostilities in a dispute over trade. For example, suppose that Britain was involved in a war against another nation, which the US traded with. Under what Britain termed its belligerent rights, she would claim the ability to stop and search neutral merchant ships and seize any goods which it was believed was heading for the enemy country. During World War I, the exercise of these dubiously legal rights had irritated the USA considerably, and let's suppose that the same was true in this hypothetical war. Only this time, the US, feeling confident with its navy at parity with the UK now, decides to escort its merchant ships to and from Britain's enemy and force its trade through. This would give the British a huge problem, since cutting overseas trade to a hostile nation was extremely important to any war plan it drew up against any major power. If the US took action to undermine this, it's likely the Royal Navy would feel it had no option but to use force to protect its belligerent rights and thus slip into a war against the United States without really meaning to. This is the scenario which some in the Royal Navy foresaw. Admiral Sir Roger Keyes, commander of the Mediterranean Fleet, told Winston Churchill in 1927, "If we are ever at war with America neutral and the American fleet sets out in convoys to force her trade, I pray that the government of the day will have the nerve to allow the British fleet to deal with the situation." American officers too were not blind to the possibility of a war with Britain, even though they too had no desire for one to take place. One difference between the two nations' attitudes though is that the Americans thought it feasible, perhaps even natural, that Britain would declare war on them to protect her commercial position at the top of the tree.
I mean, to be fair, Britain does have a history of going to war. I can see why America would be cautious of that, even having them as an ally, worrying that Britain could start war. I mean, I could definitely see, especially at that time when Britain had a bigger navy.
As far as the Americans were concerned, argues Christopher Bell, Britain had always used its navy in a ruthless and calculated manner to protect and further its trade.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's always been used ruthlessly.
And would continue to do so. Just as the British had attacked Copenhagen in 1807 to protect its trade through the Baltic, it seemed possible that they would do just the same to the US if they got the chance. So, with this in mind, in 1930 the United States Army and Navy devised War Plan Red, a comprehensive plan for a war with Britain and her dominions. The central focus for Plan Red was Canada, which it was thought would be firmly on Britain's side in any conflict. The worst case scenario for the US was considered to be a rapid and massive build-up of troops and ships in Canada for an invasion south. It was forecast that within 40 days of war being declared, Britain could have a fleet of 14 battleships and 5 aircraft carriers established at Halifax. It projected 345,000 troops could be mustered in Canada within 6 months, with reinforcements from across the Empire eventually taking the total up to 2.5 million men.
Jeez.
Clearly, to allow such a force to assemble would be incredibly dangerous.
Yeah, especially Canada's really kind of unique with Hudson Bay up there because, yeah, you could easily bring, or just how it's made, like you could easily bring tons of troops like into Canada, as opposed to just even on the coast. You can actually like bring them in halfway into Canada. So, and especially, and also with them being good or very close allies. I mean, this is definitely something that I could definitely see being at that time a very reasonable strategy, like that Britain would implement. Now I know this was the American version of what they thought Britain would do, but again, I mean, I mean that would be an excellent strategy to do that. Just bring tons of men into your ally Canada, and then you can like spread them all out and just go sit down south and just literally attack the U.S. just completely. Not even just the coastal states like other countries would kind of have to do. So yeah, having Canada as an ally would be a huge strategy for a war on America.
And so Plan Red recommended attacks into Canada to capture major cities and especially the port of Halifax, to deny the British a suitable naval and supply base on the Atlantic North American coast. Other attacks would capture Quebec, Montreal, Toronto, Winnipeg and Vancouver, aiming to overrun Canada in a very short space of time. Opposing the US drive north would be the small Canadian army of 95,000 men. The US thought these troops would attempt to hold Halifax and a line around Montreal and Quebec, but the only serious Canadian plan produced called for a somewhat different course of action. Designed by Lieutenant Colonel James Buster Brown in 1921,
that's a cool nickname, Buster Brown. I like it.
Defense Scheme No. 1 advocated a series of rapid attacks into the United States by so-called flying columns. Under Brown's plan, these units would advance to the US on the day war broke out, go as far as they could and then retreat, destroying infrastructure as they went. The purpose of this was to buy time until
Jeez. I mean, I know that's just footage, but it just seemed like all those ships on the water is just crazy.
British could come across the Atlantic to Canada's aid. However, from what we can tell, the British had no intention of deploying a major force to Canada. In the view of the Admiralty, it would put Britain into a fight where all advantages of time, distance and supply were on the side of the USA. For all intents and purposes, the Royal Navy wrote off the vast majority of Canada as having...
I feel like that's always been the one advantage to the US is we're just so... I mean, other than Mexico, Canada, South America and all that, but like compared to Europe and stuff, like again, this is pretty much exactly what happened in the Revolutionary War is just like Britain was fighting bigger and better, had bigger and better things to do, is so far away, it costs so much, it's just not feasible. And I feel like that's why the US is just kind of unique in a sense, is we're just so far away from every like European power. And I feel like that's always been kind of our dominating factor that we hold.
Fallen and began its planning from that assumption. However, it is worth mentioning here that the British never produced a joined-up inter-service war plan in the way the US did, so it's hard to say with...
Of course, I mean, of course the US was the one who was doing all the planning and plan all these war strategies. It's crazy to me. I mean, I guess somewhere in the back of my mind, I kind of know that they're probably always doing this, but it's weird hearing it laid out, and the fact that they're probably like constantly, like almost, I don't know, probably at least between every president, I would think they're probably laying out new war strategies, like what's going to happen if we stop trading with this country, or what's going to happen if we, if we're no longer allies with this country. Like there's probably always people strategizing, and this isn't just to the U.S. I'm sure this is like worldwide. Just all countries are probably always on defense somewhat. And it makes sense as a country. You need to protect your country, obviously. But it's just weird to constantly think that people are pretty much planning, either defending or attacking other countries. Pretty much just people planning to kill other people. It's kind of sad to think about. But again, on a country perspective, I do understand that you need to protect your own, and that's what countries do.
With real certainty what the British would or would not have done. Perhaps troops would have been sent across the Atlantic, but even if so, they would have likely found ports to be in American hands. This was because Defence Plan No. 1 put very little emphasis on holding the Atlantic ports, even as it relied upon British troops entering through those very same ports to aid the Canadian Army. Unsurprisingly, almost nobody within the Canadian military thought this was a sensible idea, and Defence Plan No. 1 was very quickly dismissed. Brown's successor as Director of Military Operations and Intelligence, Andrew McNaughton, even ordered all copies of it to be burnt. On land then, it seems pretty likely that the US would have been able to overrun Canada, save perhaps for a few key bases on the east coast. How a war would progress from there is unclear, and seems not to have been very clear in the minds of those planning for it. Plan Red essentially hinged on the idea that in the long run America would be able to mobilise its superior resources, and with the occupation of Canada eventually forced the British to make a favourable peace deal. The British planned to use its navy to just make life unpleasant for the Americans. A strong fleet would be sent across the Atlantic to be based at Bermuda, with smaller fleets in the Caribbean and at Halifax. From this position they would try to keep the American fleet bottled up, unable to attack British shipping while enabling British cruiser forces to hurt the US's overseas trade. Neither side was keen to seek a major fleet engagement, so the strategy for both would be to try and make the war as unpleasant as possible for the other side, and essentially outlast them. The reality would be that without Canada as an active theatre, neither nation had a very effective way to deal a decisive blow to the other. The only way this might have changed, and this is what the Royal Navy feared more than anything, was if the US was able to gain a naval base in Western Europe and move its battle fleet across the Atlantic first. With a US fleet in place in Europe, the Royal Navy would find itself pinned down, with its trade routes open to being decimated by roving US cruisers. A serious blow to Britain's overseas trade would always be decisive, which is why the Royal Navy was always so anxious to maintain its superiority on the oceans during the 19th and early 20th centuries. Ultimately, we will of course never know the outcome of a war between the United States and British Empire, as thankfully policymakers on both sides of the Atlantic knew just what a self-destructive folly it would have been. Instead, War Plan Red would be filed away, and a decade later Britain and America would find themselves allied once again, joining forces to help rid the world of fascism.
So yeah, that was really interesting. Thanks for recommending that. Yeah, I'm definitely glad that we never went to war again with the UK. I mean, I definitely love being allies with you guys. You guys are awesome. Yeah, it is really seeing all these hypotheticals and these types of scenarios. They're really interesting. The military strategies and planning that gets involved, even if it doesn't get executed. Just watching the hypothetical is, I don't know, it's really eye opening. Just kind of seeing what, like, all the different strategies that, like, because they try to think over everything and plan for every little thing. But overall, it was a really interesting topic, and I'm definitely glad that I watched it, because I'm sure there's probably honestly. Okay, I mean, I don't know for sure, but there's at least probably hundreds, if not thousands, of these, probably like in the Pentagon or something, that they've planned out. So anyway, yeah, thanks for the recommendation. I do appreciate them. They've definitely been really interesting. You can comment below about this stupid ass weather we've been having. Or you can comment for future recommendations. If you like this video, give it a like. And I will see you guys next time. Peace out.